Welcome to this explainer. Okay, if you've ever caught yourself wondering about the invisible architecture that literally powers the modern web, well, you're in exactly the right place. Today, we're going on a seriously fascinating macro to micro journey. We're going to start way up high, looking at giant physical hardware, those massive machines humming away in data centers, and then we're going to zoom all the way down into the individual lines of code that actually make websites come alive. It's a fantastic progression, and by the end of this, you're going to have a crystal clear picture of how the whole shebang connects.
All right, let's dive right into our agenda today. We're covering demystifying the server, inside server hardware, the client-server dance, static versus dynamic web pages, and finally, an introduction to PHP scripting.
So, Section 1, Demystifying the Server. Now, before we start throwing around terms like gigabytes or processors, let's actually redefine what a server really is. At its core, a server is just a system, a mix of software and suitable hardware that responds to requests across a network to provide a service. The absolutely crucial distinction here is that server usually refers to a role, not necessarily a specific machine. Basically, any computerized process that shares a resource with clients is technically a server. So think about it. If you configure your own personal laptop to share files across your Wi-Fi at home, boom, your laptop is fulfilling the role of a server. It's the mechanism of sharing driven by the operating system that truly makes it a server. But on the flip side, when we hear the word server used in the hardware sense, we're almost always talking about heavy-duty rack servers. These beasts are purpose-built from the ground up to host software applications under extreme network demand. I mean, these definitely aren't the machines you'd use to browse social media, right? They are absolute workhorses designed specifically to share massive amounts of information seamlessly and reliably. Moving right along to Section 2, Inside Server Hardware.
Looking under the hood, it's kind of mind-blowing how different the priorities are between your standard consumer PC and a hardware server. For your home computer, you want sheer CPU speed, a beautiful graphical interface, monitors, killer audio, all that good stuff. But for a server, actually, absolute CPU speed matters way less than having incredibly fast network connections and high input/output throughput. Because servers are almost always accessed remotely over a network, they usually run in what's called headless mode. No monitor, no mouse, no graphical interface, not even audio. By dropping all those unnecessary features, it saves precious system resources that can be dedicated entirely to serving data to users like you and me.
And because they're so focused, servers can be incredibly specialized to provide very specific services. We've got web servers hosting HTML pages, game servers connecting players all over the world, mail servers routing our emails, file servers giving us remote access to documents, and database servers storing critical data. There are dozens of types out there, literally from print servers to proxy servers, but these heavy hitters really highlight just how specialized server hardware can become. Which brings us to Section 3, the client-server dance. So how do our everyday computers actually talk to these massive machines across the network? Well, the client-server programming model operates on a really classic hub-and-spoke design. That central tower, that's the server program, just sitting there awaiting and fulfilling requests. The laptops and PCs surrounding it are the clients. When you open up a web browser on your computer, you're operating a client program. It sends a request out into the void asking for specific HTML files, and the central web server intercepts that request, processes it, and shoots the web page right back to your screen. It's this continuous invisible dance happening literally millions of times a second, all over the world. All right, Section 4, Static versus Dynamic Web Pages. Now, you might be wondering, if a web server is just handing over simple HTML files, why do we need such advanced server-side operating systems? Why do servers need to do more? Well, it's because the web is essentially divided into static and dynamic web pages. Static pages are fixed. The data doesn't change because they don't interface with databases. They just exist exactly as the developer typed them. But dynamic pages, oh, they are alive. Dynamic pages interface directly with online databases, most commonly MySQL, to retrieve and store data in real time. This is the exact technology that unlocks interactive features on the web. Every single time you use a login page, register an account, or use a content management system, you are relying on dynamic web pages pulling fresh data from a database. And that leads us perfectly into Section 5, Introduction to PHP Scripting. Powerful enough to be at the core of WordPress, deep enough to run Facebook. Just let that sink in for a second. To really anchor this abstract concept of server-side code to the real world, we absolutely have to talk about PHP. PHP stands for Hypertext Preprocessor. It's an incredibly widely used, free, and open-source scripting language. Look, if you've ever read a blog on WordPress or checked your feed on Facebook, you've interacted with PHP. It's the highly efficient engine running on the server side, acting as a wildly popular alternative to competitors like Microsoft's ASP. So, what exactly makes it so powerful? Well, PHP doesn't just output plain HTML, it generates dynamic content on the fly. It can create, open, read, and delete files directly on the server. When you submit a form online, PHP is what collects that data. It sends and receives tracking cookies, it controls user access for secure logins, and it can even encrypt sensitive data. It is so ridiculously versatile that you aren't even limited to text. Seriously, PHP can output images, PDF files, and interact flawlessly with those MySQL databases we just talked about. And despite all that power, the actual code is elegantly simple. A basic PHP script just starts with a bracket, a question mark, and PHP, and then it ends with a question mark and a closing bracket. Right there in the middle, you have commands, like echo, which simply tells the server to output the text, "Hello World." The absolutely key takeaway here is that these PHP scripts are executed entirely on the server. By the time the result actually makes it back to the client's web browser, it's been fully converted into plain HTML. The user never, ever sees the underlying PHP logic. They just see the final dynamic result. Now, PHP manages its internal data using variables, assigning text and numbers to variables like txt, x, and y. What's genuinely beautiful about PHP for developers is that every single variable simply starts with a $sign. Plus, and this is a huge time saver, unlike languages like C or C++, PHP doesn't actually require a formal command to declare a variable's data type. The very moment you assign a value to it, boom, the variable is created and ready to use. It's streamlined, it's efficient, and it makes it incredibly accessible whether you're a total beginner or a seasoned pro. Wow, okay, we've covered some incredible ground today. From those heavy-duty racks operating in headless mode all the way down to the precise syntax of PHP communicating with MySQL databases, you now officially hold the map to the web's hidden infrastructure. But, knowledge is only the beginning. So now that you completely understand the invisible architecture from physical server racks down to a single line of PHP code, what dynamic experience are you going to build first? Keep learning, keep experimenting, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.